Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our panel discussion, Why You Can't Find a Stage Manager. Why did we call the panel this? The reason is because it seems to be the increasing resounding cry in the Australian performing arts and entertainment industry. Why can't I find a stage manager? Or where are all the stage managers? So I thought this might be a good opportunity to explore the complex answers to these questions. Joining us on the panel today, we have Eloise Grace, who has recently taken up the position of Company Manager at Dance North in Townsville. Eloise moves to Dance North with an extensive background in stage, tour and logistics management for theatre festivals, ceremonies and events. And most recently, company management in the commercial musical theatre sector for Australia's leading commercial theatre producers. Next we have Rex. Rex is currently tour producer at Art Tour, having returned to Brisbane after 7 years living overseas and working in various stage and artistic management roles on one of the biggest productions ever produced in the world, The House of Dancing Water in Macau. And we have Julie Amos. Julie joins us from regional Victoria this morning, where she is now based, running her own company, Amos Enterprises, outsourced arts management. Julie was previously General Manager and co-CEO of Hot House Theatre, General Manager of Orchestra Victoria, and Music Operations at the Australian Ballet, Music Operations Manager at the Australian Ballet. Julie moved into these roles after an extensive early career in stage production and event management, working for Opera Australia, Opera Queensland, Victorian Opera, the Royal New Zealand Ballet, Woodford Folk Festival, and international sporting events in 3 countries. Tanya Malouf is currently a tour producer for Art Tour and continues to freelance as one of Brisbane's hardest working and highly sought after stage managers. Tanya was Deputy Stage Manager at Opera Queensland from 2003 to 2008, before becoming Company Stage Manager at the Queensland Ballet from 2009 to 2012. Additionally, Tanya has worked extensively as a stage manager with every major performing arts organisation in Queensland, including Queensland Theatre, Le Bois, QPAC and Expressions Dance Company, and as a project coordinator for Queensland Music Festival. Finally, we have Ashley Hintz, who joins us from Melbourne today. Ashley is currently the Operations Coordinator and Tour Manager at Opera Australia. Ashley was the Senior Stage Manager and Show Caller for the Victorian State School Spectacular from 2010 to 2015 and has undertaken various stage management positions for the Melbourne International Comedy Festival, Queensland Theatre, the Production Company, St Kilda Festival, Brisbane Festival, Expressions Dance Company, Dead Puppet Society, Opera Australia and Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. She's also worked as a tour manager and as an operations and production coordinator for Midsummer Festival and White Night. So as you can see in the collective professional background of today's panel, you would be hard-pressed to find an Australian performing arts and entertainment company, venue or organisation that is not represented. So beyond what we hear and see anecdotally in regards to the workforce profile of stage management in Australia, census data tells us that 70% of the stage management profession in Australia are aged under 40 years of age, with nearly 26% aged between 25 and 29 and are predominantly women. Stage managers are much more likely to be young and female than any other cultural worker. In 2017, I published my master's research study, the aim of which was to identify and explore the career development challenges that Australian female stage managers face in order to establish if they encounter recurrent factors that prompt their premature exit from the profession. In addition, the project sought to characterise the career transition experiences for the individual by interviewing those in the field and try and identify effective strategies they could use to promote increased workforce retention, extended career span, or deliberate and effective redeployment of transferable skills. The study found that the reasons stage managers leave the profession are multifaceted and complex, and not one single thing prompts an exit, but rather combinations of role stress, precarity, job stress, early career motivations, career limitations, lifestyle factors, and lack of social support systems combined in various ways that lead stage managers to move on from the profession prematurely. While this has obvious implications for the individual, it has even greater implications for an industry that finds itself increasingly unable to find suitably qualified and experienced personnel to service this ever-expanding sector. In recent times, there has been a renewed focus on mental health and well-being of those working within the Australian arts and entertainment sectors. Globally, the entertainment industry has also been buffeted as a result of the Me Too and Time's Up movements. In Australia, we are seeing our own instances play out, the outcomes of which will inevitably have implications for stage managers and their future professional experiences. Today's panel aims to promote an open discussion around a number of these issues. The first part of the session will be a question and answer with the panel informed by the existing research findings. The second, and most importantly, will be a panel discussion regarding a way forward. What can we all be doing differently, better, to increase retention within the profession? And thirdly, we'll take questions from the floor. Okay, so let's start with career motivations and psychology. Why stage managers become stage managers in the first place? If I could address the first question to all the panel members. In the study, many stage managers reported that they get into the industry because of a passion for the role and the work, and because they feel stage management is something they were born to do and was a calling, not unlike other performing artists. Was this your experience, and can you describe what drew you to stage management in the first place? Eloise, I might start.
Yes, it was a while ago now, but it certainly was a desire to be a fixer, someone who was core to the recognising of problems and the solution of them, which is really what theatre in its essence is a collaborative process to solve a lot of problems to culminate in the director or choreographer's vision of what a production is. And I think what my personality was or is someone who can quickly ascertain a problem and a solution for it. So, and that combined with the love of theatre, it just seems the natural area for me to work in.
I wasn't always going to be a stage manager. I originally thought I was going to go into outdoor recreation, and it was only by chance that I had done a Queensland Theatre Company actually offered a school holiday program in theatre and drama, and I, as a year 9 or 10 student, decided I should do that because I didn't want to stay at home for the holidays. And so I went and did it and thought it would be fun. And through the course of that week, I was like, I really don't want to be a performer, I don't want to do drama, but we did have a stage manager actually come and talk to us. But what I would have to say was probably the most boring hour of the whole week.
Who was it?
I actually don't remember who it was. Some woman, she was talking about it, and but it must have, at the time I came home and I told my mum was like, how did the week go and everything, and I sort of came back and I was like, but there was this woman, and it sort of stuck with me, and so then I started to wish I had paid more attention and started to investigate more about what that actually was about. And from that point, I then changed all my subjects at school and focused on going to stage management.
I kind of, again, didn't have stage management on my kind of to-do list initially. I knew I wanted to be part of the industry. My dad's been part of the industry for many, many years, so I'd met a lot of people and worked with a lot of people and saw the sense of community that was within the industry. So I kind of said, yeah, I want to be a part of that, but I wasn't sure how or where. And then through doing a traineeship at Queensland Theatre, straight out of high school, I kind of met the stage management people. I was like, oh, these are a cool bunch of folk. Went to uni from there and quickly discovered that stage management came very naturally. I found that it was instinctual to me. And it satisfied my problem-solving need, and also being able to people-please in terms of being 3 steps ahead and fixing problems before people were aware they were a problem.
Yes.
So I just...
Be aware.
Yeah, still may not be aware.
Yes, correct. They're fixed. But it was. I kind of looked at the first few jobs I'd had in high school and realised that all the things that I liked about them in the context of a delicatessen or in a clothes shop were things that kind of came together in stage management and made it fun to do.
My mum tells a great story of me trying to organise a house from when I was like 2 years old. So I'm pretty sure the sort of the organisational nature and the problem-solving nature started very young with me. But I was very drawn to live performance from a very young age in a non-theatre family whatsoever. My family, it wasn't a thing my family did. I have a very distinct memory of when I was like 13, sitting in the Lyric Theatre watching a musical. I'm not going to tell you which one, because one... No, it wasn't Cats. It was definitely not Cats. I'm not going to tell you what it was, because that gives away how old I am.
Starlight Express.
It was Starlight Express. It's also...
the original production of 42nd Street.
Not that old. But, yeah, it's sort of an embarrassing show. But anyway, so I remember sitting there and going, that's what I want to do, but didn't want to be on stage, knew right from that stage I wanted to be backstage, and that's sort of where that started. I was lucky that my school supported technical production, a very base level crew at school, but I wanted to go into sound, which Tony Brumpton is absolutely horrified by, I'm sure, because I'm a terrible sound person. So from there, sort of shifted into stage management and working in community theatre. But it's not, I wouldn't say it was necessarily so much of a calling, but it was just something I knew that I could do. I was a fixer and an organiser, and I knew I could help in that way. So.
Yeah, just quickly first, I just wanted to acknowledge that we're on Turrbal and Jagera land, and wanted to give respect to their elders past and present and future. And being a stage manager, well, I wasn't really even on my radar. I'm a failed musician, I guess. So from the country, moved up to Brizzy because it was the closest capital with uni, and did a music degree at the Con, as you do. Probably spent more time at Ridges than in any of my lectures. And then at the end of my degree, because I'm a stayer, I like to finish things, I needed 5 credit points and did a subject called Large Instrumental Ensemble Management, which basically meant I got to tell all my peers what to do and mark the role and have a bit of authority. And I thought, this is a bit all right. I don't actually have to be in the band, but I can run the band. So I guess that's probably where it came from. But, background, no theatre in my family, no theatre really where I grew up. I come from Grafton in northern New South Wales, and it's an Oz Opera pit stop on the way to somewhere else better. But they would regularly come through, and that was, I guess, my first kind of interaction with the arts. And I remember it very vividly. Bless Richard Gill, who we just lost tragically last week, but he was the conductor of the first show I ever saw, which was Magic Flute. And it blew my mind. I mean, I was like, wow, what the hell is this, and how do I get involved with it? So, as a musician, always been interested in theatre, but yeah, large instrumental ensemble management.
I think also, just to kind of add on to what I said, was that theatre was an immediate community and family to insert oneself into, and the added bonus of being a problem solver for that community. So going from maybe a high school that I didn't feel like I necessarily fit into, and then at uni and then being exposed to the wider community, I really felt like I had a place to be, and theatre has continued to be that place where I fit. So on a maybe a wider level, less so about stage management, but theatre is where I feel like I belong and have a place to be.
Where you find your tribe.
Yeah, where I found my tribe. Yeah.
Okay. So the way in which stage managers view their work as a vocation and the connection they make between work and identity leads some stage managers to overwork and make personal sacrifices. If I could direct this next question to Tanya. Tanya, have you experienced this or seen this in your career? And what is the impact, do you think, of this mindset on stage managers and the productions on which they work?
Yes, I was going to say, I think for me, I do take my work probably too much to heart. I do always say I put too much heart into what I do. I think theatre has become a hobby or an interest of mine. So if I'm not working, I'm at the theatre or I'm going to see something. So it's really, it sort of all melds. And if you have a night off, it's like if someone goes, hey, what are you doing? Can you come to this? So you go and do another, go and do another show, or you fit something else in between. So it really hit home for me, I suppose. One, I didn't go to my best friend's wedding because I had to call a show. And I actually almost missed my sister's wedding because of show, but I did actually fight on that one at the last minute, and sort of I did give them plenty of notice at the company I was working for, but I did in the end stick my heels in and go, no, I'm actually not going to miss this. I've missed a lot, but this one I'm not going to. It really hit home for me probably the most when I had children. So I have 2 children, an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I went through postnatal depression after both of my children, especially my second one. It hit me really hard, and I think it was just that I just all of a sudden was at home with this little person that I couldn't manage. I couldn't tell them that we were going out at 10 o'clock and that you had to be have your costume on and you had to do this and you had to do that, and everything started to escalate from that point, and it really hit home that I was like, everyone kept going, but do things that you love, and I'm like, but I don't know who I am without stage managing because I've done it for so long. And so for me, it really was a big wake-up call. And, I have to say I probably I'm probably still healing. I still do gigs because I love doing it, and I think I am constantly torn because I still love stage managing. Stage managing doesn't particularly fit so well into my circumstances and my lifestyle now with a young family. But I can still do the odd gigs here and there, and I try to fit stuff in. But it's been about trying to find what's next and what else stage management can lead me to, and understanding that the skills can transfer, and that I actually am able to do something that isn't directly stage management, I suppose. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's actually quite interesting the number of stage managers you talk to who've become mums who actually deal with postnatal depression, because I did as well, with my son, who's now 5, so I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. It was with Imogen, the 2-year-old, I was able to really proactively manage that because I knew what was coming. But I 100% agree with Tanya. You go from being a stage manager who writes schedules, that's your job, to make sure everyone's on time, to schedule everything within an inch of its life, and then you have this baby, and this baby doesn't run to any schedule. And some babies can be put on a schedule. My kids never worked like that. So, and it's a shock. And also you've taken away, like Eloise said, from essentially your extended family of your show, of your company, to go on maternity leave, and all of a sudden you're trying to work out who you are, not only as a mum, because you're a new mum, but also, hang on a minute, I'm a stage manager, and how does this all fit into this new dynamic?
Friends and colleagues are all working.
Yeah.
I'll just add that that's not paid maternity leave.
Well, I will say that I was relatively
you're
fortunate, because when I had my children, I was working overseas, and I did work for a company that had some maternity leave. I will say that maternity leave was 6 weeks. That's it. So most stage managers in Australia don't get that. I got it, but it was very minimal. So it's about, again, that's something that the industry can improve on, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk for a moment about role stress in stage management. The research indicated that organisational politics, the management of competing agendas, both creative and practical, sexism and gender discrimination, the supporting nature of the role, and the lack of understanding of the role and the stage manager's function within broader organisational hierarchies create discontent within the profession. Ashley, do you believe that the role of the stage manager is well understood in the industry, and what do you think our gaps in understanding are?
No. I think it's interesting. When I first moved to Melbourne and kind of met new people that weren't necessarily in the industry, I realised that telling someone new what I did in 25 words or less was difficult, and also always felt like I was underselling myself, because there's always so much that we all do. So I think as well, there's not many people within the industry other than your peers who are working in different rehearsal rooms in different buildings at the same time that truly understand what you do. I think perhaps there's some really intuitive directors or really aware cast members that may get it, but no one sees what you do from where to go except yourself, because the director never sees the cast member who you've talked down from walking out, or convince them to submit to being directed and take the note, or the cast member never sees you fighting at a production meeting for their hours or for their safety. No one sees all of the elements at once. So people can have a really good idea from different angles of what you do for them, but I don't think it's really understood properly, except maybe within this room and on this panel, what it is in a whole role, I suppose. Yeah.
Does anyone else want to add?
Oh, I just think it is a role in which you're the servant of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 masters, depending on the company you work for, and that changes from show to show. The director you work with would be, or the choreographer or what have you, would have a different expectation sometimes within the same day on what your job is, and then that relationship, on paper you report to the production manager who has different expectations of what you have. And none of these expectations necessarily are wrong. But it does create certain points of pressure when your masters, the people to whom you report, have those things are juxtaposed and sit in a level of conflict. For example, there are directors who absolutely need a certain amount of paperwork or information given by the next day, whereas you might have a production manager who doesn't want you to do any overtime. So to serve those two things can be very difficult or impossible, or you turn that inwardly and do it in your own time to both serve the director and the budgetary requirements of the show. So that kind of pressure it can happen in a myriad of ways, and it does add up.
I think also too that the stage management role has many aspects to it, and like in larger companies or different styles of genres, you'll actually have an assistant stage manager, a deputy stage manager, and a stage manager, and each of them have very defined roles. Whereas in other companies, you actually do the whole roles all together. So I think a lot of people kind of go, "Oh, you're the stage manager, you're here to call the show," and think that that's really but really that's sort of like probably 10% of the job. Or depend on nature, or when I was the deputy stage manager, that primarily was my role, but it wasn't all I did, and things like that. And oh, you're the ASM, you just go by the props. But there's also a lot more to that. So I think it's that sort of thing, particularly when you do take on the whole conglomerate in one thing, that people kind of don't really understand how much is actually involved in the stage management role. Like, it's very easy to go, "Oh yes, I just call shows," or "I just shop," or "I just buy," I'm just a shopper, or "I just do this or that." But when you put the whole role together and take on every aspect, it's actually a lot more to it than meets the eye. And that comes down to whether there's like company managers as well, because often the stage manager can hold that role, or and even in operations roles, like with technical, sometimes you hold many roles that sit outside of stage management, but depend on the company structure. So,
Eloise, with the Me Too movement playing out in theatres across the country, how do you think this has and will continue to impact the role and the work of the stage manager?
I think this is, I don't know how it's going to unfold. It's a really interesting question to ask, and it's a really interesting thing to reflect upon. As a stage manager, you're a witness to everything that happens in the rehearsal room, backstage and on stage from go to woe. You also understand the context most of the time within what the director is looking for. You're also responsible for being the workplace health and safety representative in the room at all times, and if abuse and bullying is included in that, it puts a lot of pressure on you as a stage manager to maybe shine a light on that or report that, when perhaps that's not in the best interests of getting the show on. But it is actually, on an ethical level, incredibly important.
Do you think that stage managers will be more empowered now to speak up?
I would hope so, but I think that would, again, fluctuate from company to company and also director to director.
Does anyone else want to add anything?
We don't have time.
That's a whole panel in itself.
Yeah.
Okay, different from role stress, job stress encompasses issues faced by stage managers in their day-to-day work. These can include having to undertake a large amount of responsibility, work duties and responsibilities being poorly defined or not properly articulated, being treated badly, and lack of recognition in value. Rex, when the job and its responsibilities is not clearly defined, what do you think this means for stage managers and their work?
I think this sort of takes on to some of what Eloise was saying, in the sense that every company you work for, the stage management role is slightly different, and quite often it isn't clearly defined. So in true stage management nature, I think all stage managers just take on anything that's thrown at them, and sometimes that means it's well beyond what could normally be classed as a stage management role, but it's something you see that needs to be done to get the show up, and that's ultimately what everyone wants to see is the show happens. And because of that, you take on more and more, which then builds stress levels, and then you just keep taking on more, and there's a point that you can't take on anything more. So it's just, if it's not clearly defined, it's just adding more and more to your workload. So and it's difficult, particularly when you're working in a small company, because you do end up taking on everything, but then it's also learning how to actually pass some of that back out to try and lower everyone's stress levels.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I heard when I was doing my research is that it's the word catch-all kept getting used in relation to the job. So everything that came up that wasn't anybody else's job became the stage manager's job.
Yes, that's right.
And that's it, because I worked for a couple of companies that were developing, and if you don't, if the people you're working with don't have a clear understanding of what stage management is, they tend to just dump anything that could vaguely be stage management at the people who will actually make it happen. And then the role ends up being far bigger than it actually needs to be. And then it's difficult to share. Like, speaking from experience of the 7 years in Macau, stage management took on a whole bunch of responsibilities in the creation period of that show. It doesn't necessarily sit with stage management, but then you tip over into operations. You're trying to get the show running. You're trying to make sure that everyone's safe. But then there comes a point where you have to sit down and go, what is actually our role? Should we be doing this, or does this belong to coaching or physio or technical departments? But then it's actually hard, because you've done it for so long, to say this is now your job, and pass that responsibility off. So.
And in a short term time frame as well, like the most pressured period is in Tech Week.
Yeah, so you just
When
do it.
Yeah, who has time to sit down and go, well, that's, I'm going to do it, but it's not really my role, or who can I pass this on to? It's, make or break time in Tech Week. You do it because you want the show to succeed, and because stage managers take on that responsibility of making sure that everything that needs to be done is done. So I'm not offering any solutions, possibly adding more questions, but
also, I think most stage managers handle stress very, very well, and I think you quite often see in other people in various teams people who don't handle stress well. And the stage manager's nature is to try and take that away from people. So to help other people not be so stressed, you add to your own stress level.
I would counter that, same way that also agrees with it, in that stage managers handle stress in a very inward way.
True.
So they manage their stress in a way that maybe is not best for their own health. It's certainly, a great stage manager is one who does not exude a sense of panic, but the fallout for that in a personal way has been quite big for myself, and is something that I have addressed, in the last few years. But it kind of gets to a tipping point for some people, maybe not for others, and it's that kind of still waters thing. Yeah.
Agree.
And I think going back to what Tanya was saying as well, if we all put a level of heart into it, we all have a passion for it, which means we're never going to let things fall over. We're going to pick up all those little pieces, and we're going to fill those gaps, because our priority is to get the show happening.
And hate ourselves if we don't pick up those things.
And sleep is totally overrated.
Sleep is unnecessary.
So building on from that, Julie, the research revealed that many stage managers believe there's an entrenched culture of stage managers being expected to simply accept and remain silent in unpleasant situations, whether this is unrealistic expectations and responsibilities or rude and inappropriate behaviour from company and creatives. With the two agendas of creative freedom and personal well-being often at odds in the creative process, and often viewed as one coming at the expense of the other, how do you think this could be reconciled?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know how many times I've caught myself saying, just suck it up. It's just a week. You get to the end of the week and then you get another gig. I mean, the nature of the roles that we do, because they're predominantly freelance, I mean, we haven't talked about it yet, but there's probably only a dozen full-time jobs, if that, a dozen, probably less now. But you're always thinking about what's next, and there is definitely an element of I have to endure this to get to the next part of my career.
Yes.
So yes, again, I'm not offering any answers here. I'm a terrible panel member. And it's such a tricky role that we play in such an interesting process, in that I think it's changing very slowly, but we still do have elements of godlike creatives that we encounter. And, we've all worked with them, probably less and less now because we choose not to surround ourselves with those people. But with the conflict between that creative process and the needing to get the work on, yes, there is a lot of friction that can happen, and you can have creatives that seem great before you hit the theatre, and then as soon as you're in there, nothing can be good enough. There's just not enough time, and that's probably because legitimately there isn't enough time because theatres are expensive and the company's got no money, and it's so make or break, so much pressure on this production to succeed and sell tickets so we can continue to live and thrive. That in that tech week, it's all in the room. So everyone's pressures, own performance anxieties, and wanting to have contracts after that week, it's all bubbling away in this week, and you do end up with explosions. And, it might not be a very well defined or understood role, what the stage manager does, but I can guarantee you that if the shit hits the fan, sorry, you are going to have to edit that out. The seas will part, and there will be a clear line to the stage manager, and the expectation will be, sort this shit out. Yes. Carly's already mentioned that through her studies, it's become apparent that younger women are in stage management roles. And let's just have a little think about that for a minute, that we've got young women in these roles dealing with really complex personalities and situations, and that they are then expected to sort these situations out. To try and offer some solutions, because that's why I'm here, what should you do really in that situation when you do encounter it? I mean, I've been through a lot of HR training and have been a general manager now, and I know what you should do. You should manage up. But I've also been in that situation where you've tried to manage up, but no one will listen, or no one will help, or the person above you is ill-equipped to help resolve that situation, and also not at the coalface, so can skirt around the issue and hide. They only have to hide for a week, and then it's dealt with.
Yeah.
So
by the very fact of it passing.
By the fact of it passing, exactly. So that's also not a solution, but it is what you should do, and you should absolutely try and do that. Please manage up, and please, people in a position to do so, employ people that aren't going to hide and that have the skills and experience to deal with the issues when they're brought to them. I guess the other offerings I can make is that it's a really big, we're talking about systematic changes to be able to support these young women, hopefully older women and multicultural faces that will join us and have a really diverse stage management sector, or group of people within the sector. But we need to support and enable people, empower people to be able to call people out on their bullshit and bad behaviour, and support them so that they don't feel that they're going to lose their job or be victimised for calling out this behaviour. I don't know how exactly we do that, because I've been in situations where you've got a problem with a creative and a cast member, or a creative and a crew member. Who's the cheapest person to replace? What's the thing that we don't have? Money. So, at these critical points, we need to have a choice about doing the right thing for humanity. I know that's very big. And the right thing for the production as well. And then, just factor in that we're in this really time-critical moment of a tech week. You can't replace a creative. No. Like, who are we kidding here?
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen.
Being passive is going to be the fastest way to get the solution that you need, which is to move on.
Yeah.
Which, ethically feels at odds.
Yeah. But, if your creative is unhappy, everyone's unhappy. And without the creatives, and we might not even be talking about the director or the lighting designer, we could be talking about a prima donna cast member. If something isn't right in the mix, it is down to the stage manager to manage that situation. And we've all been there, and we've all sucked it up. We've all said what needs to be said to get the show onto the road. But how do we address that as a sector? I think that's a very good question. And I make small offerings and inroads, but I think,
Yeah.
Okay, lots to think about. So the precarious nature of an artistic career is not unique to stage managers, but many reported poor remuneration, particularly in relation to hours worked and responsibilities undertaken, and the irregular employment patterns as some of the key factors that drive them out of the profession. Julie, if I could ask you again, how much does the precarious nature of stage management employment drive your own career has driven your own career decision-making processes?
Me again. Well, a lot. Obviously, I'm not a stage manager anymore. I think I'm a little bit out of the loop now, but if I had to have a stab at what the top stage managers in Australia are being paid right now, none of them would be breaking 100,000.
No.
Nowhere near it?
No, nowhere near it.
I think probably around 90,000 that I know of is.
Yeah, so 1,800 a week is the max.
Yeah, so as far
And
as.
that's on a 50-hour standard, 50 to 56 hour week contract.
And what sectors would that be?
That's commercial only.
So that's probably, what percentage of the sector would you say?
Oh, I don't know how many stage managers are in the industry, but that would be 3 or 4 stage managers.
And that's
Would be earning
1,800, no overtime, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Overtime if it's worked beyond 56 hours, which but you have to earn those. Yeah. Incidentally, all of those are male.
So
Side note there.
that's the sort of salary package we're looking at. We already know there's less than a dozen full-time jobs. So you're talking about piecing together a freelance lifestyle to try and sustain yourself, which brings along a whole swag of different issues for adults at this point, where you can't get a credit card, you can't get a home loan, you can't raise a family, you don't get maternity leave, you don't get long service leave. Just start me on why we need portable long service leave in this country, but that's a whole nother panel. But it's just not sustainable. In all honesty, I don't feel like it's something that you can do with any longevity. And the career progressions, they only take you further away from the stage. So you can go into management, which is the route that I chose, but it's less satisfying. It's not what you got involved in the industry in the first place for. So, yeah. And just while we're talking about salaries and things, I don't work for any companies anymore, so I'm not going to divulge who paid me what, but in senior management, I've earned in excess of $140,000 a year. So just as a comparison, that's a pretty rare salary out there, so don't look at people going, God, you're earning heaps. But if you move away from stage management, the skill set that I had was worth that much in a different role.
Rex, what do you think can be done to provide greater security in employment for Australian stage managers? And the reason that I've sort of targeted this question at you is for someone who worked overseas and was able to continue stage managing through 2 pregnancies and having 2 young children and that sort of thing. Like, what was going on over there that that enabled you to do that, I guess?
Well, I guess in a way, the easiest answer to this is, support the arts. More companies doing great work that need stage managers, but that's a very simple, very easy answer. The difference between what allowed me to continue as a stage manager when I was working overseas was the support network. One of the reasons I chose not to be a stage manager when I returned back to Australia is because there's no daycare in the evenings. We don't have a family support network that could look after our kids while we did shows. No daycare, and just the fact that it's a lot of weekend and night work, so that does take you away from your children, and as the kids get older, you see less of them. The biggest difference is that support network. The pay was significantly better overseas. The benefits as part of an employment package were significantly better overseas. I was in a full-time role that had sick leave, holidays, all of that you don't get so much when you're freelancing. So I think the way the industry can go forward in supporting stage managers remaining as stage managers beyond their mid-30s, or once they have a family and they want a home loan and they want to be able to support their life as an adult, is to do that, to offer better pay, better conditions, better salary packages, and create more full-time positions. That's difficult. That's a whole sector conversation though. So it's, because our industry in Australia is quite small by comparison to the industries in the UK and the US. I have friends in the UK who job share a stage management position on a West End musical. So looking at things like that, looking at job sharing, flexible stage management positions, it's not necessary, that's not going to work during a tech week, but if you're going to work really hard during a tech week and then have a flexible relationship for the run of the show, some of those shows run for years, that's fantastic. We don't have opportunities like that here. Let's start at the base level and actually get maternity leave. That's probably one of the best places to start. So,
okay, thank you. Stage managers in the study reported lack of organisational loyalty and support, the impact on interpersonal relationships, and the lack of mentoring opportunities as significant barriers to continuing in the profession. Tanya, what social support systems, both beneficial and detrimental, have you encountered during your career, and how did they impact your ability to continue your stage management career?
I have to say I did a lot of work for I was very lucky, like I have been very fortunate through my whole stage management career that I did sustain a career, freelance career for a long time. I was fortunate enough to hold what was considered a full-time position, even though it was not a full year, calendar years, but for a full season. And stuff like that. So I did feel that, I was supported and there was room to grow. I mean, it is a similar thing though where, I have worked in a stage management team for a lot of it. So, you do have a set number of people. So as long as those people are there, it's there, but it's whether those people move on and give you opportunities to, move on to different roles, or whether you outgrow the role you're in and things like that, I suppose. I also experienced artistic director leadership changes at an organisation, and there's a lot that goes around that generally across the board for all people, but that probably in terms of detrimental things where you can work for many years for a company and be loyal to a company, yet with just one person changing, that can all just be in vain, or you're not not considered as part of the senior management team, for want of a word, and so it's just sort of like, well, we can find someone else, or a new artistic vision comes in with people they want to work with, and so all your loyalty to that company or to that team is in vain, regardless of your history or understanding. There's just no welcoming to that. So I suppose that's what I could.
I've actually been privileged to have a lot of support in my career. I think the people I've kind of butted heads with against most is just, and I'm actually quite good at managing, the creative personality. But the biggest frustrations I've had has also been the creative, some creative personalities and people that are, frustrating and potentially unsolvable. But I've been lucky to have good support from production managers and from producers. I also I think that there's a lot of emphasis put on how great the cast is in a show from the company, and there are a lot of extra perks that the cast get that are negotiated by their agents, which is great. Good on them. But things like car parking, being afforded to a cast member when the stage manager is actually the one working a 10 to 12 hour to 16-hour day. Those kind of things, after a while, start to smart in that kind of level of support, which is often from a different department. But they're the kind of things that actually can save you a fair bit of money and time.
I think a lot of it too, is that a lot of stage managers do have creatives and people that they do like to work with, and vice versa. You tend to find that not always, but you either stick with companies or you stick with specific creatives and stuff like that. So, I have commented to a few people of late. I don't think there's an answer for it, but that often just because this person is great with that person doesn't necessarily know the right stage manager for that show.
Yes.
And I often say, you know, if you actually look at who's the shows that are particularly in Brisbane, say, all the shows that are happening in Brisbane at the time and all the stage managers that are employed across those roles in stage manager and ASM, whatever, it's like, if you had have just moved 3 of them around, it would have been awesome. But how they were laid out or who was there, it hasn't worked out, you know. And a lot of that is that puzzle of trying to freelance and, you know, you take, you know, the gigs that come in on order, but often, you know, the gig you've taken maybe isn't the right show that's suited for you, and someone who was on another show wasn't suited for that role. But had you both switched over, it actually would have been a very different for everybody, you know. And it's hard to look at that, you know. It's always easy retrospectively, but often I sort of say that, you know, like you said, you handpick, you know, your casts and your creatives for the show that's there, but often I don't know that the stage manager is particularly, you know, looked at in that same way.
Did you just say you're starting a stage management agency,
No,
Tanya?
I'm not. I am not. I'm a hard taskmaster.
So looking forward, just Julie, what do you think? What is the one support system that you wish had been in place for you in the first 5 years of your career?
I reckon mentoring is something that we really lack because of the attrition of stage managers. There's not really that many people around that are still doing it, that have time and capacity to help the next generation find their feet. But somebody who could have told you, yes, that's normal, or no, that's not normal, yes, you can expect that, that's a good rate of pay, and just show you the ropes. I think mentoring is something that we could really benefit from.
I think on mentoring, the hardest thing is too, like, particularly with stage management, often you are a lone operator.
Yes.
Like often, you know, whereas if you go into a lighting department or a, you know, mech department or something, you usually are surrounded by, you know, your show has 8 mechs or 4 mechs or, you know, what else, you know, 3 lighting or, you know, and so there's other people you can bounce ideas off, whereas often as a stage manager, you are on your own and in isolation, and so, you know, like, to have this many stage managers in one room is pretty incredible. Like, that never happens. Like, you know, you'd never see that. Like, you know, we could all be employed at the same time, but we would all be spread across the whole state or the nation, you know, and so you'd have to physically find 5 minutes in your 16-hour day to go, I'm just going to ring Eloise and see if she's experienced this or or, you know, or when you happen to run into someone somewhere that you could actually look at that. Whereas I was going to say, I know early on, I used to always say, you know, while the university degree was great, I always said it really needed to be a traineeship. You really need to then spend like almost, you know, 6 months in a rehearsal room or in a theatre or in something with watching a stage manager do it and go through the processes so that you don't, when you do, particularly as a young female, you know, 19 or whatever, and kind of going, oh, actually, this, you know, I was fortunate. I did have a wonderful woman lead me through a lot of it, who's sitting out there. You know, so I did have that guidance, and I was very fortunate to find that. And I think, you know, for me, that really did develop me, and it really helped me as a, you know. But it is really hard, and I did search for it for a long time. And to, you know, you kind of go, you need that, and someone to sort of, you know, tell you, look up, don't look at the score. You know, watch the show. You know, learn this, talk to that person. Don't, you know, and
pick up the phone.
you know,
and the little things.
All the little things that, you know. And I actually came in a few years ago and watched the students. In a P4 course, and I was going to say, and after the first day, they'd had a really tough day, and it had all gone really badly, and like, you know, they were in the production office saying, oh my gosh, we're never going to happen. I'm like, it's Monday night, you don't open till Friday, like, you've got to like, don't panic. It's not, but it was just that thing where, like, for them, they're just going, oh my gosh, it's all falling apart, and it's like, yeah, that happens, don't worry. Like, you know, and they did, I mean, to their credit, they both, you know, they did turn it around and they really pulled together and did make it happen. But it was that moment watching them, like, just, you know, that light go out of their eyes and go, oh no, what do we do? And it's like, you're fine. Like, this happens. You know, it's not ideal, but it happens, you know, and I think that's what you sort of need. Like,
I think the idea of mentoring was something that was repeatedly mentioned when I was interviewing stage managers, and it was something that I had not ever really thought of before. I mean, I think I was lucky enough to have a good mentor early in my career, but I think you and I were speaking about the same person. Got a lot to answer for. Also, and in my subsequent research around mentoring, there was this sort of idea of peer mentoring, which is, you know, about us kind of relying on each other rather than looking up all the time. And I mean, I hope that events like this are kind of just the beginning to kind of building a better community of, you know, it's amazing how many times in my career I've texted stage managers now that I teach, and I'll say something in the room and I'll go, oh my God, is that actually a thing? Like, is that actually standard industry practice, or did I just make that up at some point and decide that that's how it happens from now on? And I will often, like, depending on, particularly if it's not my own area of expertise, like I, you know, specialised in music and dance, and now I'm teaching primarily a theatre course, and so I'll say something and then I'll text Jodie or you and say, oh, is that, I've just given this note about a props preset list, but I haven't done one for 15 years, like, is that? So I think maybe around mentoring, like looking up, because there aren't those people because of the attrition and because people are busy and they move into busier roles, that this idea of peer mentoring is something that...
Yeah, I think that's probably more valuable in a way, and because of that attrition, I'm a big fan and supporter of a lot of the stage managers, younger ladies and stage managers in this room. But if someone were to call me and ask me a stage management question, I'd feel instantly exhausted. So, although of course I celebrate anyone giving me a call. But maybe text is better. I can temper my response. But that peer mentoring is really, and that's what we had, Carly. You know, when you and I graduated as well, we with Amy Foreman, now Chan, and Jo Curry, we were very much supportive of each other, and still are, but very much so in the early years of figuring it out.
I think I'd also say too, I can see a lot of the students that I've worked with out there, I would encourage you to actually, people you've made connections with, I would encourage you to actually send them a text message, maybe not a call, but call that person. Like, don't be scared of them. There's no, just because they're an industry professional, you know they're busy and, you know, maybe they're not specifically in stage management anymore, but please don't be scared to actually reach out and say, and ask the questions, because that's how this will all start.
Yeah. And I think the need for a network or something like that within stage management in Australia is, you can see it's needed by the sheer excitement online. Please record it, I have to see it. It's just getting kind of people in the same room to talk about it. And you look at something like in the UK, they've got such a big stage management network and they've got more shows and more people and blah, blah, blah. But I think there's a great use in kind of identifying who the mentors in the industry are and kind of connecting them in a really easy way to students. Or, when I graduated from university, I was one of about 3 that are currently still working in the industry at all. And I, from memory, sorry if I've forgotten someone, but I was the only stage manager, so I didn't necessarily have that peer support. I definitely had people I felt comfortable going to, and asking questions, and yourself as well, but there wasn't that kind of peer support. And being able to identify fresh graduates in Victoria or New South Wales at the same time and making those connections and asking those silly questions. There's a Facebook group now which is super useful, mostly, unless you're asking for blood again. But the need... But there's a need for that network, and people want to talk about it and people want to share, but because we are also isolated, I think it makes it really hard.
I definitely agree with you. I did, with all sarcasm aside, that Facebook network and 2 good friends of mine are administrators of it. It is really valuable, and I think it is really valuable, particularly for people who have not had the privilege of a university education or are approaching stage management from a lack of resource. That is particularly useful for that sector of the industry.
It was actually, just before we move on, it was actually when I started to reach out to people, when I first started looking for people to interview and started talking about this, every single person that I spoke to was surprised and was just sort of, I thought I was the only one that had been through this, or I thought I was the only one that, and I went, why do you care? Like, I thought I was the only person that cared about this. So it's actually, again, it's that isolation in the role that means that we're not connecting with each other. And I think that's probably something we need to be doing.
Yeah, well, and I celebrate your work for that as well, because that has brought us together today, and you know, I think it has started, you know, a small turn of this group.
Thank you. Anyway, moving on to less pleasant things. The research revealed that incumbent lifestyle factors associated with stage management career provide one of the most significant barriers to continuing in the profession past a certain point. These include a lack of work-life balance, the challenges of travel and touring, long and irregular working hours, the toll on mental health, the toll on physical health, the lack of flexibility afforded by the job around children and domestic life, the pressure placed on personal relationships, and exhaustion, fatigue, and burnout. It's all positive.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
Ashley, were there any of these factors involved in your decision to move on from stage management?
All of the above.
Yeah.
I think I come at it, and I know we've had conversations about it as well, I come at it from a very different way in that when I started learning about stage management and getting involved in it, I kind of quickly identified in the back of my head that this was not a sustainable lifestyle, and at some point I was going to have to get out. I didn't go into it thinking that I was going to stage manage forevermore, even though I would like that. So I started touring more and started doing gigs back to back, and you know, quickly realised that I'd never been overseas. I had to really think about when to book a dentist appointment because I was prop shopping for one show in the morning and doing a show at night, which is, again, exceptionally lucky to be in that position and loved what I did, and I kind of kept feelers open and was looking for something to move on to. And then found the job that I'm in now and kind of went, okay, that looks like something that it's a nice transferable kind of transfer of my skills into something that's very similar. I tour, I'm on the road for a little bit, but I come back to a desk, which is exceptionally lucky. And it's using all the skills I had and still there, but having the 9 to 5 for the rest of the year and being able to, you know, stress on personal relationships and getting a cat, which was very exciting, which I didn't think I was going to be able to do, going overseas for the first time. There's all these things. And I mean, I still do gigs now, and if someone calls me and says, do you want to come and call this show? I'm like, yeah, definitely. Because it's still, the pang is there. I wish I could do that forever, but personally I didn't feel I could. And I also saw a lot of people in my network and the kind of national network that I identified personality traits and lifestyles of people that have been in the industry for a very long time that I didn't want to end up that way. In terms of physical and mental health, stress, isolation, all those kinds of things that I just, it's like, that's not for me. I'd like to still be involved because it is a passion of mine, and to be a facilitator for others to do what they do best. But I saw negativity in my future if I kept going the way I was going. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, completely. I went into stage management after I graduated. This is the best thing ever. I was telling everyone that needed to be a stage manager, this is how great it feels. And then it was about 5 years into it that I went, oh, this isn't going to last. This kind of pancake manner at midnight kind of post-show discussion over VB's life is a bit dull or running out, not sustainable. And so that's when I started to look elsewhere. I mean, you know, I still even stage managed a show last year. Is something that I dip back into with less and less passion each time I do it. Yeah, it's not for the long. I just don't think it's a job that can be done forever.
Unless circumstances change.
Unless circumstances
Because
change.
let's face it, it is actually the best job in the world.
Yeah.
Like, and we love it, and we would do it.
And I think we dive into each project thinking it's going to be that idea about what it is, because everything has the potential for it to be the best ever.
Eternal optimism.
Eternal optimism.
And I think that's something that came up a lot is, I mean, Ashley is interesting because Ashley's the youngest panel member, but of everyone that I've spoken to, most stage managers get into the industry and think, oh, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I can't imagine not doing anything else ever. And then it's quite a shock when when they get to a point where they go, oh, this is not long, not for the long term. So it's and then there's a whole lot of implications for that around, well, how do you reimagine who you are, and and stage managers decide really early in their lives that that's what they're going to do, and so
Yeah, and the making the decision, is going back to study, is actually if you're going to move completely out of the industry, going back to study is no mean feat the second time round, or as a mature age student. Or four. Don't do things by halves, babe. And so, that you making a decision for what you think is going to be the rest of your life when you're 17, 18 years old, and then 7 years later or so.
I think it's a hard thing, because I know I'm delusional, but I still think that I'm going to be a stage manager forever. It's just
You just happen to not be doing
I actually just
myself.
can't do it. It's just because of my circumstances of having 2 young children, and also being able to to be there for them, because I didn't have children never to see that all that aspect. The nature of the job doesn't allow me to continue to be a stage manager. Like, if there was a way that I could have both, I think if you could have both, then I would by all means love doing it. But I can't. And so that's why I've had to stop doing it. And I think for myself personally, that's why I've struggled for so long to work out what I want to do, because it's like, that's what I want to do, but I can't. And my circumstance with my husband and my relationship, my family unit doesn't allow me to do that. Other people's can, mine doesn't. I mean, I'm not married to an industry professional, like, he does not work in this industry at all. There's lots of things that come and go with that, but I actually cannot continue as a stage manager. If there was a way I could continue, I probably still would be doing it, because I actually really love the job, and I really love the work. And yes, there are moments where we all, at the end of a tech week, you go, I'm doing this again, or you're still going to shows where you just go, this is the worst decision I ever made, or things like that. But
going into a first preview and the second half of your prop script is blank.
Or going, I can't.
You're just getting the
You still got interval. You still got intervals.
There's an interval, right? Did you make that decision?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I still plan to go back to being. I would like to go back and be a stage manager again, and I would still plan to do that. But right now, my family circumstance is just the whole fact that it's all freelance work and contract work. Like you said, there's very few full-time positions. I have a child in daycare. That's $600 a week. I need to be able to talk to Centrelink about what I earn so that I can actually get some support, because let's be realistic, none of us get paid enough to deal with $600 a week every week. So, at the moment, my circumstances don't allow me to be a stage manager. I would like to go back to it at some point when my kids are a bit older. I look at my mentor, who's not in the room today, but I actually think she's watching. She has done that, and I think that's a great thing. But right now, it's not in my foreseeable future.
So, building on from that, Eloise, acknowledging that travel, touring long days and late nights are inherent and perhaps unchangeable aspects of the arts and entertainment industry, how do you think these aspects can be managed more effectively to make the profession more sustainable?
Well, I think we touched on the idea of job share, and that would take an element of implementing systems from those 2 stage managers who might share that role. That would be a really interesting experiment for a company to see if that works. I know in the UK they just had a job share agreement for an onstage ensemble dancer.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, really interesting.
And not impossible. It may be something, the idea of job share might be something that is better suited to the longer run shows. The level of information that is in the stage manager's head during those crisis points of tech week and through to opening, potentially that's an area that can't be shared, but with a bit of thought and planning, maybe that's something that it can be shared. If we look at the idea of the magic bus, which we all, was drilled into us as students, is that something that we can extrapolate upon to do things like job share? you know, is it better for the safety of the show for that? Is it, you know, I am spitballing in a way, the idea of a full-time stage manager or a production stage manager for companies to oversee all of the shows that have their still have the same number of people in each team, and that stage manager slots in for those times that you know, there are children at home that are sick, or dental appointments, or sisters' weddings, you know, that kind of idea. I don't have the full answer, but I think it's something that, and not just for women in stage management, I think across the board could be looked at in a more nuanced way.
Anyone else want to make any sort of recommendations or ideas or?
That's tough.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay. So, looking forward, few final questions. As this panel is being hosted by QUT Technical Production and as one of the institutions charged with educating the next generation of stage managers, reflecting on your own training, education and early career, what do you think you would have benefited from in order to prepare you for the rigours of the profession and increase your longevity as a stage manager?
I would say a considered discussion or unit approach to health and mental health, physical and mental health and financial management for the individual.
Tanya?
I was going to say, a lot of it I think we spoke about before when we talked about mentoring. I think, like, you know, if you have got some sort of support or someone that you know you do get tasked with, that you have, like, that you can contact, that necessarily isn't within the university walls that you may have come into contact with, or, you know, often I've seen a couple of young students of late who, you know, did a very bad secondment, you know, and things went wrong and then have been tarnished, and, you know, you then work with them and go, why is this person not working? This person's amazing, but, you know, something happened that, you know, tarnished them or something, you know, and that happens across different things, but, you know, why were they blacklisted, or why did that happen, or, you know, was there any follow-up on that person to find out whether, you know, some people really just shouldn't be in the industry, but some people some people genuinely, like, you know, particularly when they are young, like, you know, you do, sometimes it takes you a couple of shows to work it out, like, you know.
Yeah,
and,
I certainly was that person.
and I totally think
absolutely.
that sometimes that, you know, there are certain, you know, I think that would be, you know, really important.
Ash?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I made a couple of notes last night, and the physical and mental health were the two things that I kind of sat on. I think a lot of that, you need to obviously teach people as they're learning, which is really important. Obviously, there's a huge cultural shift that has to happen as well to support that. And I hope that, you know, as we have these conversations and as, you know, in a tertiary institute, as people are educated differently, this will kind of filter through. But just, yeah, really on a base level, just some strategies to deal with all the stressful, awful situations that we've spoken about. How to manage up, what does that mean? Financially, yeah, how to make freelancing work, how to be wise in those things. Physical education, because you can always tell someone how to lift, but show them how to lift. What does it mean to engage your core and use your glutes? Like, how can you avoid that back injury 3 years out of uni that everyone seems to get? Just little bits like that I think will help. And, you know, there's great initiatives going on. Obviously, the wellbeing collective that Arts Centre Melbourne are working on at the moment. I'm going to a mental health first aid course next week, which I'm really excited about. So that's just in terms of, as a manager, being able to identify things and assist rather than, you know, a cast member becoming unapproachable because, you know they're having a hard time. Just, I think, really good strategies in physical and mental health, and also not relying on the, I don't know, there's something that sticks in my mind from uni, and maybe that's why I was so cynical early on. It's just the fact that you're about to work ridiculous hours and you're going to miss every family event for the next 20 years. You know, that can't be how people exit into the industry. You can't miss weddings, you can't miss birthdays, they only happen once. your birthdays happen every year. Important birthdays.
They happen every 10 years.
Yeah, I think on that, and that kind of loops in with the question before. When I did a show a couple of years ago, and I had kind of lost my nerve in regard to show calling. It created too much anxiety in me. That, and coupled with the fact that I wanted a weekend off for my mother's birthday, but they were desperate enough for a stage manager that they agreed to that, and through negotiating, and the lovely Nicole Neal called the show like a dream, and I managed the show on the ground, and it was it worked really well, and worked particularly well in that environment with that theatre in the round, and maybe. And it's only show to show and team to team, but looking at different ways to meet the needs of the show to the people, and it was notable.
And the sky didn't fall down.
And the sky didn't fall down. Yeah. Mm. And it didn't cost them any more money.
Yeah. That's the most important.
Yeah.
I think these guys have covered it when they're talking about physical and mental health, but I think coupled with the mental health side of things goes, make sure you do have a life and an interest outside of the industry, which I think the course is actually sort of encouraging now, because they encourage you to get out into other disciplines and actually take minors, is that right, from other areas. The people who I see survive in the industry are the people who actually are able to compartmentalize a little bit and walk away and have an interest. And I think that's really important, whether that's you want to run marathons in your spare time, or you do marathons in your spare time.
I swim, I don't do marathons.
No. Oh God, it could be anything. It could be the fact that I don't know, I climb it. Yeah,
By four.
She's got four babies. My thing in Macau was I joined the trail running group, and I went trail running with a bunch of people. And no, I don't run marathons. Definitely don't run marathons. But find something else that inspires you outside of the industry, because the industry is tough, and it's stressful, and it's tiring, and it's fickle. So make sure you have something that ignites your passion outside of the theatre, because that's what will keep you going when the world is tough inside. And I don't know how the course can necessarily offer that, apart from encouraging you to look beyond theatre in the minors you take.
Yeah, I think also that's really important, because a lot of people get into professional theatre as through a hobby of theatre. So when all of a sudden
it's sort of your passion. Yeah.
Because it is your passion, and when your hobby becomes your work, you need another hobby or another thing.
Another horse.
Another horse.
But I think too, that's how I managed touring life when I was touring with Phantom, and that's how I managed life in Macau, was having something that wasn't the show. Eventually that became my kids, but having something that wasn't the show.
That's also not alcohol.
There's also not alcohol. Yeah. That's actually that's incredibly important. Yeah.
Joy?
I would add a HR component, because I think you work for so many different companies, you come in so quickly and take on so much responsibility that you sign the bit of paper that says you've read the policies and that you're going to adhere to them, but you've never read them. You don't even know what they say.
Did you get them to start off with?
Probably not.
On that's about a formal culture versus an informal culture. Like a formal culture is all the stuff written down. The informal culture is the stuff that you pick up, and you not necessarily don't necessarily align.
Yeah. But our training institutions are really good at teaching us how to do a prompt copy and how to plug the lights in and make the sound system work. But I certainly didn't in my time. It might have changed now, but we didn't touch on any people management other than you were responsible for the shows at the university. But I think some formal HR training and education about vicarious liability as well, which is a term that I've learnt about. But I think that's really important, particularly with the current climate that we live in and the types of issues that are landing on stage management shoulders.
Now might be a good time to throw to the floor and see if there's any questions from the floor.
Thank you everyone for coming today. all your stories quite resonate really well with my personal story too, so I can appreciate everything that you've gone through, and your tribe is here and supporting you too. I had a question that actually tails off what you've just said, Julie. I'm not sure how many of you are based in Queensland, but the recent changes around the due diligence and the legislation changes around that, I'm wondering, has any of you observed or started to feel any impact upon that in working within that? I'm getting blank faces, so possibly not. So
Possibly not.
We've started to see some changes in contracts. As I say, only through, not through stage management, but both Rex and I work in tour producing, and in Queensland, and we've seen a lot more in the shift in contracting and coming back from venues and stuff and wanting things rewritten or reworded to cover that, mainly around that. But
I've seen it a lot more, something I kind of noticed more in commercial theatre quite early on, particularly the producer I just most recently worked for, but of course in a commercial world one can afford the legal team to put that stuff together. Yes, but no, not something I've picked up. But stuff does take a while to trickle down through all the little nooks and crannies to stage management.
I'm sure you probably will start to see it. Like, it hasn't really hit yet, but I'm sure it's coming.
Anyone else?
hi, I wanted to interrogate you a little bit more. Early on, you were asked a question around, what else can change to make it more sustainable. The five of you have an enormous amount of experience, both as stage managers, tour managers, company managers, general managers, etc., etc. So you have a lot of management experience. Can I challenge you to sort of think outside? I thought Eloise suggested job sharing, and I think you also said potentially engaging like an overarching production stage manager, looking after teams. What else? Like, what do you want to see? We're always working with limited budgets, but ultimately, at the end of the day, we all know that once something changes, whether it's by law or
by groundswell or
exactly, things do change. So, what are they? Tell us as a room that what you want to see.
I would really
change.
like a change from the idea that you aren't necessarily, to be a genius, you don't have to be a dickhead. That you can actually be a genius. This is in a creative world. That you can be a creative genius and not a prick.
The indulgence
And
of
the indulgence of it.
The cult of personality.
The cult of personality.
Yeah.
Sorry for swearing. The general culture of accepting that that's just how that person is untenable to me. And I would like to see that addressed and changed across the board.
It was interesting because that's one of the questions that I asked in the original research, and every stage manager I asked the question to immediately self-limited on their answer to that question. So, and I would have to push and say, if money was no object, if culture was no object, if you could just blue skying, like what would you say? But automatically a stage manager is already working within a budgetary box or an organisational box, or saying, this would be
or an
great.
efficiency box.
Yeah, so one of the things that came up a lot was this idea that happens in musical theatre, which is the idea of the suite. Someone that's trained across multiple roles that can, if you want to go to your parents' someone's birthday or a wedding, or that there's someone there, but then immediately a stage manager would say, but that's not, in the subsidised sector that would never happen because no one would ever spend money on that. So,
I think a lot of it, like you said with the job sharing, but I think a lot of it comes down to the hours. We spend a lot of time making sure that artists don't go outside the 38 hours. And working, scrutinising, to make sure that that's the case. And so I think, whereas our contracts are for 50 hours, whereas I think if our contracts were for 38 hours, and the majority, apart from maybe the 2 leads and the tech week, pretty much most of those actors would be working 24 hours in that week.
Yeah.
And I think if if the stage managers was to work 50 hours, but it was split in half, so you're only working 25 hours, you know, or even if you did up to your 38 hours, but, you know, you've got the time to, like, you know, because you do spend a lot, like, you sit in a rehearsal room, the rehearsals go from, you know, 9 till 6, so you're there from 8 or 8:30 to open up, get everything prepared. You usually miss your lunch or have half an hour lunch or, you know, whatever, and then after everyone leaves, you then have to, you know, write down everyone's hours, document this, lock everything up, clean, you know, and you don't leave until much later. And so a lot of that, you know, could possibly be shared or could be shouldered elsewhere or managed so that, you know, you can, like, you know, like you said, if you need to go to the dentist in the morning, you can go, well, the rehearsals in the morning is still going to go fine, and I will arrive at lunchtime, you know, which, you know,
which I have actually experienced
Yeah.
that in the last couple of shows I've done, which has been, you know, I've had appointments that were unmissable and absolutely had the support of the company to attend those, and my ASN.
And I think that is starting to shift, but I think it comes from like a culture within. I think it, you know, it's about building, you know, like I mean, I have been fortunate, but, you know, by working at a company with the same people that are consistently there, that, you know, everyone knows, you know, how the other people work, you know, stuff like that. It allows that more, whereas when you're every show has got someone different, in, out, you don't know who everyone's abilities and strengths and stuff, or you can kind of go, oh, well, maybe we could get so-and-so in there, they were supposed to be doing this today, but they can come into that, so, you know, it's a bigger job to do the puzzle, I suppose, but if the role of the stage manager was scheduled like the rehearsal schedule is, to maximise everyone's hours and do whatever, the same with the stage management team, maybe that would allow, you know, more flexibility and more options within that.
Ash? Yeah, I mean, I think most of my feelings around cultural change and from below and above, but I think maybe in a perfect world, when you start your stage management agency, the ability or the knowledge that if you push back on a contract or you do take some time for something that you deem special, even if someone else doesn't, that you're not gonna miss out on a job later, or you're not gonna be overlooked for something later. Having that maybe a little bit of distance from, you know, production manager or artistic director to the stage manager, and having that
I think also that I had the guts to request those changes very late in my career and long after I had finished being a full-time stage manager.
And I think you, at all of those times, you were in a position where the company needed you more than you needed the work.
Right.
And so you were empowered into a negotiating position that young stage managers are not always going to feel.
Necessarily. Yeah.
There'll
That's
always
right.
be someone
But
else.
I don't think that means that they can't have access to that. They shouldn't have it. The younger, greener stage managers shouldn't have the right to ask for that.
I think you raise a really great point, Sandra. Things do change. They change slowly, but they do. So we always need to be aspiring to be part of that change. I was having a think on the plane on the way up here, and made a bit of a list of, you know, what can I offer as solutions, and I think they're all really big things that we need to work on, but I will share them with you. Employers employ women in senior roles and pay them well. Encourage creative teams to be diverse and include women, no more all-white male teams. Tell your daughters and nieces they can do any job they want and encourage them to speak their mind, take up space and challenge opinions. Teach your sons and nephews to respect women and to call out sexism and injustice whenever they see it. Fathers, give your partner the choice of going back to work and you stay at home with the baby. Advocate for affordable childcare options at your workplace. This includes providing airfares and appropriate accommodation for children to tour. Women, don't sell us out. When in a position of power, use it to progress our cause, call out bullshit recruitment processes, implement family-friendly initiatives, and ensure sexual harassment is not swept under the carpet. Tell people what you're doing and why. Educate yourself and as many others as possible.
I think that's a really good note to end on. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. I hope the rest of the world is still continuing to run while the stage managers seem to be in this room. And a particular thanks to our panellists today for your time and your candour. I know it's counterintuitive for stage managers to sit on stage and to share their own stories.
We found our light, though.
I don't think any of us know how to use a mic.
Sorry,
yes, so thank you so much. And there's a few of you have travelled long distances to be here, and so that's really, really appreciated. And I hope today's discussion has provided some insight into the complex factors that lead stage managers to move on from the profession that they love, and it's provided a starting point for some long overdue conversations in our industry. Thank you, and